I was born in Budapest, Hungary, and the fact that I was born there and lived there gave me a slim chance of survival. Here there is a map of Europe, and if I can, I don't know, there are the red arrows. That's where Hungary is, kind of in the middle of Europe, and that's where I was born. This is just pictures of my immediate family. The top row are my grandparents. The row under that is my parent generation. And the third row up here is where I first appeared. On your right-hand side, there is a house, which is the front of my grandparents' home, who lived in a small town called Galanta, and I have another map. Oops, I'm pushing the wrong. There. Galanta is just about 2 hours north of Budapest, and there are the circles just to show you the distance. And because I'm going to be talking about them, that's the reason I have it there. This is the rest of the pictures. And there is the house again, the front and the back. And there are all kinds of pictures intermingled. You will see some stars. I don't know if you can really see them next to some of the names. And that means those people were murdered in a very short period of time. Let's see if I can show this. The cursor isn't working. On the top, in the middle, there is a picture that I have a bigger one right here. It's just a family snapshot. The girl standing up, that's me. And I'm the only one that survived this grouping, which is a very sad situation. But that's what happened. Unfortunately, I was born 5 months before Hitler came to power. And so, although Hungary was a different country, and for a while they left us alone because Hungary was allies with the German government, the other Hungarians helped the Germans in the military. So they left us alone for a while, but there was anti-Semitism in Hungary even before Hitler came to power. So my whole childhood was kind of intermingled with what was happening in Germany. As a little kid, I knew that there was only propaganda in the Hungarian news, the radio or newspapers, magazines. They had only propaganda. So in order to find out what was really happening, my parents always listened to the Radio Free Europe, which was actually against the law. So I had to be very quiet, and I couldn't tell anybody. So I knew that wasn't a good thing. I heard Hitler on the radio always shouting, and you didn't have to understand German in order to know that whatever he said was not good. So that's how I grew up. But in Hungary, as a little kid, I could do whatever my parents wanted me to do, and I was okay. Although I knew there was a quota system in the schools, they allowed only 2% of the student body could be Jewish, which is a very tiny group. So when it was time for me to go to school, my parents signed me up to a Jewish day school, and that way I was okay, and I didn't have to be, I wasn't bullied, and we were all in the same shoes. But I knew that something terrible was happening in Germany. You probably, most of you know what an Aryan person looks like. In 1934, the German government asked all the professional photographers to send in their most Aryan-looking baby picture. And this is the little girl that won. It's hard to see because it's a copy of a copy of a copy, but take my word for it, she's kind of cute. Like any other little kid. Unfortunately for their science, she was Jewish. So that's where that was. If Hitler would have looked in the mirror, he wouldn't have passed the test either. So that was not a good test. But otherwise, in Germany, at the very beginning, the Jews lost their citizenship, they lost their businesses, but at that point, if somebody wanted to leave the country, Germany let them go. At that point, they didn't want to kill the Jews, they just wanted to get them out of Germany. Unfortunately, most of the people were there for generations. They served in the German army, and they couldn't imagine that something terrible is going to happen to them. Unfortunately, they were wrong. So, so he came to power in 1933 in January, and everything for the Jews, everything changed. Then they gathered books and they burned them in the middle of the cities. Of course, they didn't burn all the books because we still have them, but that's not a good thing to do. And unfortunately, without getting political, it's happening now in the United States. They're not burning the books, they're banning the books, but it's the same thing. So after that, things got worse and worse. And in 1938, in March, Germany annexed Austria, which was no problem for them, excuse me, because Hitler was born in Austria. The language is the same, so they just went in and took it over, and they were there. If anybody saw The Sound of Music, and I hope you all did, it's a very nice musical, and that gives you the history of the annexation of Austria. In 1938, in November 9th and 10th, was Kristallnacht. And that's when the German Nazis went around and threw bricks and stones to Jewish store windows, home windows, synagogues, tried to burn them, and the fire department just stood there and made sure that the other buildings don't catch on fire. I happened to be in Berlin in 2014, and I was very surprised because they showed us a synagogue that was saved. One of the German officers realized that that was on their national registry, meaning it was more than 100 years old, and they saved that one building because of the fact that it was on the national registry. Otherwise, they couldn't care less. So most of this, at that point, I did not know, but some people did. I guess in the United States, Kristallnacht was on the front pages of many newspapers. Then in 1939, September 1st, Germany occupied Poland, which started the Second World War in Europe. And then they took over more and more countries, one by one, and wherever they were, they did the same thing. They gathered the Jews, they either killed them outright, they put them in concentration camps or work camps and ghettos. And those ghettos were a certain size, and they put all these more and more people in. There was not enough food, there was no medicine, so it must have been a horrible situation. And most people did not realize what was going on, they just knew that people were just disappearing. My dad had a clerk in his store who was born in Poland, and the Hungarians Germans kicked her out, and with many other people, of course, from the country, and she had to go back to Poland. And we never heard from her. So I figured that she was probably killed as soon as she got there, because we never heard anything else. So then, finally, as the Germans were taking over more and more countries, in 1943, the Soviet Union started pushing them back out west, out of the Soviet Union, and people felt that Germany is not going to win the war. So the Hungarian government, knowing that, and knowing that the Soviet Union is communist, they didn't want to be occupied by them, so they tried to make peace with the Allies. Of course, Hitler found out immediately, and they occupied Hungary from one day to the other without any resistance whatsoever. They were just there. That happened to be March 19, 1944. And then whatever they have done in Poland in 5 years, they accomplished in Hungary less than 2 months, which is hard to believe, but it did happen. By that time, I go back a little bit. The Germans were killing people one by one, which was very hard on the German government, the soldiers, and it took a long time, so it wasn't very efficient. So in 1942, they gathered some of the top Nazis in Wannsee, Germany, it's an outskirts of Berlin, and they came up with the final solution. So by the time they took over Hungary, the gas chambers and the crematorium was going 24 hours a day, every single day. So they were at that point, very efficient. So what happened in Hungary, they arrived on the 19th of March. By the 1st of April, all the Jews had to wear a yellow star. And people were always very optimistic, and they said, so it's no big deal to wear a yellow star. But it was a big deal because all the laws that came out for the people who wear the yellow star. And you couldn't go out on the street without it if you were Jewish. So by the 1st of April, we all had it. I don't know how. It had to be a certain shade of yellow. It had to be a certain size. It was made a certain way, and it was done. As I said, I don't know how they did it, but we all had it. And then all the laws came out for the people with the yellow star. So my grandfather, who lived in that small town, Galanton, sent a message in the early April that they have to move because a German officer needed his house, and they're moving with another family, and he said, as long as they leave a roof over our heads, we'll be okay. And then we didn't hear from them, so I have no idea if they had to move again, or they had a ghetto, or anything. So I have no idea. At the same time, another law came out that non-Jewish people could not work for Jews. We had a housekeeper in our apartment who wasn't Jewish. She had to leave and get her own apartment. And my dad had a clerk in his store who was also not Jewish. He had to leave. But that it didn't make that much difference because my dad had to close the store and report to a work camp. And this, as you can tell, it has the emblem of Shell Oil. They had a refinery near Budapest, and that's where my dad was in forced labor. these people, I don't know why they thought that was a good idea to have these people lose their jobs, because there wasn't any jobs left then. But anyway, so my dad was in this camp. I'm an only child. My mother and I were in our apartment in Budapest, and I think I have this is where we lived. And so what happened was, as I mentioned, the Germans occupied Hungary the 19th of March, 1944. By the 1st of July, all the Jews from all the countries, other little towns and villages were deported. There was I don't know how many people know the name Eichmann, Adolf Eichmann. He was in charge of the transports. And I volunteered at the Mons Museum, and we had an exhibit about Adolf Eichmann. And there was a little plaque that was given to him by the German government, November 1944, complimenting him for being able to deport 451,000 Hungarian Jews to the camps in less than 2 months. So it's not my word, it's theirs. It was written, and it was not even just on paper, it was metal. But anyway, that's exactly what happened. So in June, my grandfather sent another message that they're going to be taken out of town. Of course, nobody ever knew where they were going. And it really bothers me more and more as I'm getting older, that the people in the towns did not object to have their friends, their neighbors, people they used to be friendly with, be pushed in to cattle cars. They were not trains, they were cattle cars. They pushed 80 to 120 people, depending, I guess, on the sizes of the people. And that's how they were transported. There was no air. They put in one empty bucket and one with water and no food. And that's how they were transported. And nobody in these towns had any problem seeing these people being taken away like that. And that's one of the reasons we talk to people to realize when you see something so horrible, you have to speak up. And there were more people that just kept silence. And you can't do that. You need to, if you see something, say something. So we had no idea where they were going, neither did they. But afterwards we found out they were taken, all the Hungarians were taken directly to Auschwitz, which was Amina's biggest camp. And there was a Dr. Mengele, who was in charge of separating the people. And depending on him, if you lived or died. Anybody that he felt could work went on one side. Anybody that he felt was too old, too young, too sickly looking, or a woman with a child went on the other side. And unfortunately, that was the gas chamber and the crematorium. And they say people who were there said that it took about 2 hours from the time the train stopped and people were separated, gassed, and cremated. And thousands of people were just gone. I mean, it's hard to believe that human beings could do this. Now, Dr. Mengele was looking for a third group of people. He was doing experiments on human beings. His favorite people were twins. And he was doing horrible things to these twins. We have no idea of records. There was some that was found, but most of it he took him out with him. when he escaped after the Holocaust. But I think what they say, there were about 150 left that were still alive when the Soviet Union were able to go into Auschwitz. But they did horrible things. Anyway, most of these things we did not know. So by July 1st, as I mentioned, all the Hungarian Jews were deported from every little town and villages. I guess they left us for last because Budapest is a big city and they needed to keep, I guess, gather us separately. So then they designated certain buildings that Jews could live in, and others were off limits. Now the building we were in was off limits, but my mother had an aunt whose building was okay, so we moved in with them at that point. The Nazis wanted each room to be occupied by a family, not a person, a whole family. And to make it even worse, the way they counted the rooms, if you had one bedroom, a dining room, a kitchen, and a bath, that was 4 rooms. So there had to be 4 whole families that occupied that space. So it was pretty crowded, but because we were related, it was a little easier than if we were total strangers. At that point, we could go onto the street 2 hours a day. I think it was from 8 to 10 in the morning, and just to go to the market to buy fresh fruits and vegetables because that was plentiful. So my mother, and there was nothing else the Jews could buy. They couldn't buy sugar or flour or meat or fish or anything else, no dairy product. I received 2 ounces of milk a week because I was under the age of 12. So it was very boring, and it just, nobody knew when the other shoe is going to fall and what's going to happen next. So October 15th, a new regime came in, the Arrow Cross took over because they felt that the other Nazis haven't gotten rid of us fast enough, so they were going to do it. So by that time, all the men of working age were already in some kind of a camp situation, either a concentration camp, labor camp, attached to the army. So there were only women, children, and old people in Budapest left. So then they decided, they started with the women. They called them up, working age women, to a big sporting arena. My mother was that age that she had to go and report. The Nazis had no idea how many people are going to show up, and they had a hard time registering everybody. I have a paper, this happens to be about my uncle, and you can tell it's very neatly handwritten, and it has a lot of information on it. It has his number, whatever they gave him, his birth date, where he was from, where he was at the time, and the transport that was going to take him somewhere else, and signature and date. So it was very detailed, and everybody had to have a paper like that. So anybody that ever tells you that the Holocaust didn't happen, I didn't write the history, they did. They wrote everything down, and they documented everything. They took movies, they took all kinds of documentaries, so whatever happened is documented. So this is just one paper. So at the end of the day, the Nazis were not done registering all the women, so they said anybody who is not registered can go home and they'll be called another time. Fortunately, my mother was not registered. She came home But she said she has to think of something else to do because she's not going back there. So she found out that there was a factory in Budapest that was making soldier uniforms, which is important for the war effort. And if we can get in there, they'll save us because they need to have the uniforms. So we were fortunate and we got in there, and the only thing that's important about it's hard to say, the date is November 14th, 1944. So that's when we were there. And we never went outside. We worked during the day in the factory, and at night we slept on the factory floor on the soldier uniforms. That's how we existed there. While we were there, my dad sent a message that they're going to be taken away from the Shell Oil refinery, of course not knowing where they were going. At that point, my mother found out that there were neutral country diplomats who were giving out protective papers for the Jews of Europe because we were it. And the Swiss government and the Swedish government was there and giving out these protective papers. My mother was able to get one for my dad, and this is the paper. I had those stamps under it. That was done after the Holocaust because there were other diplomats all over Europe who were doing the same thing. They were trying to help and save as many Jews as they could, but they didn't talk about it because their own government didn't want them to do it. But by 2005, there was a big exhibit in the Cleveland Public Library called Visas for Life. And by that time, they were able to name over 100 of these diplomats from all over Europe, including from the United States also, who were doing the same thing. So we have to remember them and honor them. When Israel's built their Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem called Yad Vashem, they either put up a garden with a lot of trees, and each of these trees had the name of one of these righteous Gentiles who were, most of them the diplomats, who were trying to save as many Jews as they possibly could. Unfortunately, they ran out of space. There were not enough trees to name them all, and they started putting up plaques. The last time I was in Israel, they already had 27,000 plaques, righteous Gentiles who were trying to do the right thing. Of course, it wasn't enough, but those people have to be remembered. So we had no idea that if my dad got this paper, how we knew that it was sent to him. So we're still working in the factory, and as I mentioned, I think we got there in November. 1st of December, the Nazis came and took us all away. There were 300 women and children in this group, and they took us all away. Some of us were on trucks, other people were walking, not knowing where we're gonna end up. And as it happened to be, it was a Friday afternoon, it was getting dusk, and we arrived to a very busy marketplace. People were doing their weekend shopping. The Nazis said, we're gonna stop here, nobody should get out of line or get off the trucks. When the truck that my mother and I were on stopped, she jumped off, she winked at me, I jumped after her, and we left. And of course, nobody saw us or cared. By that time, we knew where our housekeeper lived, that she lived there with her daughter, who was my age. Fortunately, we had a very good relationship with her. She was a wonderful person. We went there, and my mother asked if we could come in for a couple of days till she figures out what else we could do. And she was a hero. She took us in, and if anybody would have found out that we were there, all four of us would have been shot on the spot. So it was a very risky situation, but as I said, she was a hero, and she let us stay there. Nobody knew that we were there. We never went outside. Her sister used to just drop in, and she didn't even trust her sister enough to let her know that we were there. So whenever she would drop in, we would have to hide either under the beds, or she had a little closet in the kitchen that we had to stand there motionless while she was there. So it wasn't easy. It was very hard to, every day we could have been killed. But fortunately, January 15, 1945, the Soviet Union liberated us, which was great. But we didn't go out because we didn't know what was going on outside. And then 3 days later, a miracle happened. My dad came and found us. That's when we found out that the Swiss paper, the Schutzpass, got to him, and the Nazi let him go. And by that time, there was a ghetto in Budapest that we didn't even know about, and that's where my dad stayed the remaining of the war. So it took 3 days for the Soviet Union to liberate part of Budapest, the Pest side, which was where they were coming from the left, from the east. And fortunately, the ghetto was on the Pest side, and we were on the Pest side, so that side we could walk around. The Germans blew up the bridges that Budapest, both sides, and the Danube in the middle. The Germans blew up all the bridges, so it took the Russians another 30 days till they could get over to the other side and liberate the whole city. And then they kept on going west, the Allies going east, liberating the different towns and countries, including the concentration camps. And when the people came back from the concentration camps, that's when we found out all the horrible, horrible things that happened there, and all the people that we can't expect to come back. Now, I know I'm on a limited time. I don't know how long I spoke. Do I have more time or not? Who is the boss? Okay, all right, I'll come to the United States. At that point, my parents asked for a visa to the United States in 1936. But 10 years later, after the Holocaust, we were still not able to, our number wasn't even close. So in 1948, my dad found out that the Cuban government is selling visas. And if he gets us visas, we can go to out of Europe and closer to the United States. So that's what we did. May 1948, we left Hungary, went to Cuba. It took another 2 years before we arrived. We were able to get our visa and arrive to the United States. By that time, I had a lot of holes in my education. So the first thing I had to do is learn English and get back to school. I was fortunate. I was able to go to Cleveland Heights High. I graduated in 1952. I went to Western Reserve University. In 1956, I became a medical technologist. I got married the same year. We had 2 kids, 4 grandchildren, and I have 2 great-granddaughters. And thanks for listening.